Tonight on Quest. As world population increases, the struggle over one of the Earth's most valuable resources continues to intensify. Are we in danger of running out of water? Join us as we take a special half-hour look at water in the world's 8th largest economy. Where does it come from? Where does it go? And what can it tell us about the future of our planet? The United States, one of the richest countries in the world. Its most populated state, California, is a global powerhouse, supplying the world with everything from airplanes to almonds. And California's ascendancy to this peak of productivity has come at a cost. Barely 500,000 people lived in California in 1865, and most were farmers. In those days, there were plenty of resources to go around. As the state's population approaches 40 million, the growing strain on California's natural bounty is palpable, and one of the most burdened resources is water. Over the last century, the state has made Herculean efforts to keep the water flowing to where it's needed. But as demand outstrips supply, who or what will pay the price? It's a question that's becoming increasingly important to farmers all over the world.
My name is Chris Hurd. I'm a second-generation farmer. We're here just outside of Firebaugh, California. We are on the west side of San Joaquin Valley, which is 50 miles west of Fresno and about 50 miles east of Monterey. And we're farming almonds and pistachios and cannery tomatoes. I've been on this land, this is my 26th year farming here.
In 1954, Chris Hurd's father-in-law, Ken Grossamer, started farming this 1,500-acre parcel in the Central Valley, one of the most productive agricultural regions in the United States.
This location has some of the most fertile Class 1 soils in the world, a very desirable Mediterranean-style climate, which is very conducive for the crops that are being grown out here.
But the lifeblood of any farm operation is water. And every year, since it was first developed for irrigated agriculture more than 100 years ago, farmers have been thirsting for more and more of this precious and increasingly tenuous resource. So when Chris passes his family's land onto his son, he'll also be passing down a growing struggle for their farm's very survival.
Because of lack of water, this is one of the fields that would normally be planted in tomatoes, but it will not be planted this year. We'll see what happens the following years to come.
So how did farmers like the Hurds end up in this situation? The history of water distribution in California is just one chapter in the mounting global water crisis affecting our planet. Starting in the 1920s and 30s, when much of the state's water supply was first developed and parceled out between farms and cities, rural districts began signing long-term contracts with US federal and state governments that promised annual quotas of water. But with steady population growth and modern environmental laws to protect fish and rivers, today's farmers rarely receive their allotted amounts.
Even when the reservoirs are full, we will not receive more than 40 to 50% of our allocation in any year.
This means that the Hurds must grow fewer crops. And since their land has no underground aquifers to supplement the allocated water they buy, they must irrigate their crops as efficiently as possible and purchase water from outside sources, which comes at a much greater expense.
I know that it puts a lot of stress on both my grandfather and my father. It is a huge concern, and it is probably the biggest concern that all growers on the west side face.
The epicenter of the conflict is the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, a network of marshes and sloughs that run through the middle of the state. The delta provides drinking water to nearly 2/3 of California residents. It also irrigates more than 4 million acres of farmland. But the delta serves another very important function. It provides habitat for hundreds of species of fish and wildlife, from egrets to river otters to king salmon. Now, Biologists and environmental groups cite growing evidence that the massive water diversions are slowly ruining the delta's health.
We pump so much water from the delta that we're degrading our own drinking water quality. We're endangering farmers in the delta who irrigate with delta water. We're putting salmon fishermen on the north coast out of work. People depend on that delta, and the delta smelt is just the focal point of the debate about whether we're going to protect the delta or let the whole thing go.
In August 2007, a United States federal judge agreed with a suit filed by Nelson's group to slow the pumping. The judge ruled that roughly 1/3 less fresh water should be pumped from the delta in order to protect the delta smelt, a tiny endangered fish that many biologists say is a canary in the coal mine. The ruling sent shockwaves across California's farming community. Farmers like Kevin Hurd say the ruling is short-sighted.
The delta is a concern to me. I think that people need to be careful though on what they're doing, because if they want the water to go to the fish, that's fine. One of these days you're gonna end up paying $70 for a pound of almonds and $50 for a head of lettuce.
The fate of the delta smelt is just one example of how humans' ever-increasing demand for water is affecting ecosystems around the world. Peter Glick is an internationally recognized water expert and co-founder of the Pacific Institute, a global think tank that studies issues like climate change and water shortages.
California water policy in the past has focused on human uses of water. All too often we've ignored the ecosystems in our decisions about building dams and taking water out of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and our other rivers. And we're now beginning to pay the consequences of that. We have to figure out how to have a healthy environment and have a healthy economy, agricultural economy and urban economy, that all relies on the same water system that's available to us.
But before you can figure out how to manage water systems around the world, it pays to understand where California water comes from and where it goes. Lush as it may appear, California is mostly a dry state. Huge sections receive only about 15 inches of rain in an average year. That's about the same as Morocco. And much more of California would look like the desert without some heavy-duty plumbing. A massive system of dams, pipes and canals moves needed water to thirsty parts of the state. It all starts with winter storms rolling in from the Pacific Ocean, dropping rain and snow in the Sierra Nevada. When the snow melts each spring, the water runs down mountains into streams, which trickle and then roar through rivers to the central part of the state. Here they flow into two main rivers, the Sacramento in the north and the San Joaquin in the south. Those rivers meet in the delta, a vast network of marshes and sloughs south of California's state capital, Sacramento. The water finally flows into San Francisco Bay and out the Golden Gate. California's water challenge is simple. 2/3 of the rain and snow falls in the north, but 2/3 of the people live in the south. In order to quench their thirst and irrigate millions of acres of farmland, California needed to move the water. Starting in the 1930s, the US federal government built one of the largest water delivery projects in the world. The Central Valley Project takes water from Shasta County and other parts of Northern California and moves it through the Sacramento River to giant pumps at Tracy that push the water as far south as Bakersfield. Most of this water goes to farms. The State Water Project, started in the 1960s, originates at Lake Oroville. Its water also moves south, but is then pumped to a different set of canals and aqueducts to thirsty cities around the state. Los Angeles also imports billions of gallons of water from the Owens Valley, using an aqueduct that runs through the desert. Southern California also draws water from the Colorado River. In the north, San Francisco is also a major water mover, pumping water from the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in Yosemite National Park. The whole system of conveyance and storage at first can be difficult to understand, but California's economy, its population growth, and the health of its fish and wildlife can be compared to the problems human water use is creating around the globe. In the end, every acre-foot counts. An acre-foot is the amount of water it takes to cover 1 acre of land a foot deep. And increasing costs are forcing some farmers to make tough decisions.
We still grow a lot of crops in California that are very water intensive and relatively low value to farmers. We grow a lot of alfalfa and rice and cotton in irrigated pasture, and those 4 crops use perhaps 50% of all of the agricultural water in California, and they produce 10 or 15% of the agricultural income. I'm not saying don't grow cotton and alfalfa, but if we grew less of it or grew it more efficiently, it could free up an enormous amount of water for farmers to use to grow vegetables, fruit crops, nut crops, things that produce much more income with much less water.
California agriculture was built on row crops like tomatoes, cotton, beans and lettuce. But today, an increasing number of farmers are switching to higher value crops like almonds, pistachios and grapes. It's not that they require less water than row crops, but they can be irrigated more efficiently, and farmers like the Herds can get a greater return on their investment.
Our farm is probably as efficient as anyone farming this day and age on the west side can be. We're irrigating, all our water is running through drip systems, which are running at 90% efficiency, versus the old row crops of running water through sprinklers or down the furrow was only 40 to 50% efficient.
Herd tries to make the most of the Delta water he buys from the US federal government's Central Valley project. For example, he's lined the canals that feed his orchards with plastic to prevent wasteful runoff.
Most Central Valley project farmers feel that we have given our pound of flesh through these different decisions. We have taken one for the team plus a little bit more. We have spent the money to change our cropping. We've spent the money for our efficient systems. We are operating as world-class farmers, and yet the decisions are for even additional cutbacks.
There is quite a bit of talk that there's going to be rationing come the end of May, beginning of June, due to the smelt and the 2 acre-foot drawdown for the San Luis Reservoir.
So how will it be possible for the world to provide enough water for its thirsty farms and growing cities while protecting the environment? Many farmers and business leaders want to solve water problems by building more irrigation systems, including dams and canals.
Statewide, we still only capture 30% of the watershed. Is it time for more storage? Maybe. Is it time to fix the delta through alternate conveyance or additional issues being discussed? Yes, it is.
But environmentalists say such projects will irreparably damage fresh water sources, not to mention cost billions of dollars, and they maintain that further conservation measures are a better alternative.
The history of the American West is the history of the Wild West written on our rivers. We've built massive numbers of dams and thousands of miles of canals to feed the needs of a growing civilization. But the aquatic frontier is closing. And that means we can't simply look out and build another dam and another canal to meet our needs, because we've captured so much of the water, there's little left. And there's much more to be gained through efficiency than going out and looking for another river to dam in California. There isn't another river to dam.
And so will the world run out of water? Ultimately, the answer depends on the efforts we're willing to make now in order to conserve.
There's the buds are coming out. Yeah. The evolution of starting to farm here with my father-in-law 25 years ago and now having my son Kevin back farming with me is very wonderful, fulfilling feeling. Yet, am I apprehensive for him to stay and farm on the west side? Sure I am. Do I think that it's worth the fight? Yes, I do. There are still great opportunities here, but with many more obstacles than anyone ever envisioned in the past.
But obstacles and opportunities in the water saga aren't just found in rural areas. They're a growing part of city life as well. For Hussein Ashtrobe, global water problems start at his San Jose, California home.
The best and most cost-effective way to supply water is to conserve water.
And conservation doesn't have to mean suffering.
Improving efficiency is doing what we want with less water. It's taking a shower as long as we would otherwise take it, but with a low-flow shower head. It's washing our clothes as often as we want, but with a front-loading washing machine that uses much less water.
And if you're looking for big savings, there's an even better place: your garden. Typically, half of the water in most homes is used on landscaping.
What I'm going to show you today is a typical landscaping that we encourage the people to have. When I got this house, it was not low water use plants, mostly grass in the front.
Ashtrobe removed the grass from his front yard. He did leave one strip in the back for his children to play on. Then he chose plants that need little water.
Some people, they think that when you talk about low water use plants, we're talking about cactus, which is not true.
Instead, Ashtrobe put in plants like rosemary, lavender, and penstemons.
Penstemons come in different type of colors, and once they establish, you don't need to do anything with them. You just do a little bit trimming every year. Most of the summer and even the fall, you're gonna have a lot of flowers here.
He covered the soil with mulch to keep the moisture in and prevent weeds. And like the farmers we met earlier, Ashtrobe also put in drip irrigation.
Roses, they don't need that much water.
The changes in Ashtrobe's garden cut his family's water consumption by 25%, and the changes inside his house cut another 20%. Now let's take a break to see how much you know about water consumption. We all know that it is essential for life, but did you know water is the only substance on Earth that naturally exists as a solid, liquid, and gas? More importantly, did you know that the US alone uses 346 million gallons of water each and every day? The average American uses up to 150 gallons per day, most of which is used in flushing the toilet. How much do we actually need to survive? About 4 to 5 gallons a day. Okay, here is the quiz part. Let's get back to toilets. How many gallons a day can you lose by not fixing that leaking toilet? 25 gallons, 60 gallons, or 120 gallons? Now let's head into the kitchen. Guess how many gallons it took to get that single egg to you? 6 gallons, 21 gallons, or 63 gallons? How many gallons of water did it take to get that juicy steak on your plate? 125 gallons, 326 gallons, or 1,232 gallons? Well, that's it. Oh, and just so you know, the water you're supposed to drink every day, it doesn't have to come in liquid form. You can get up to 20% of your water from food. Incremental changes, like the kind Hussein Ashtrobe made to his house and garden, are key to effective water conservation. But simple conservation isn't enough. As world population increases, more clean water will be needed. One way to reduce the need for potable water is to use recycled water, also known as reclaimed water, for things such as irrigation, landscaping, and industry.
Okay, so this is the headworks. And we're going to get out here, and this is the raw sewage that comes into the plant. And if you don't want to get out here, you don't have to, because it is kind of smelly out there. This is actually the raw sewage. Can anybody wants to, you can get up and take a look
This
at it.
tour
So the raw
probably
sewage comes
isn't in any
goes by
guidebook.
the screen.
This group is spending the afternoon at a sewage treatment plant in San Jose, California. It's home to one of the largest water recycling programs in the United States. The plant is virtually unrecognizable from its humble beginnings in 1956. Back then, treatment consisted of simply allowing solids to settle in the tanks. That only removed about half of the solids. Today, this is only the first of 3 steps. The second step happens in huge tanks that take up most of the plant's 170 acres.
This is where we allow the natural organisms that are in the wastewater to consume the pollutants in the wastewater. The main thing they need is air. So this plant is all about pumping air into the water so that these microorganisms can do their job, consume the organics.
The third step is to filter the water through layers of river rock, sand and coal at the bottom of these maze-like tanks. 90% of the treated wastewater ends up here in the South Bay, and the remaining 10% start to journey down the 110-mile purple pipe network to become recycled water. Purple is the universal color used for pipes that contain recycled water. The water that flows through these pipes isn't fresh from the mountains. It's water that's been used, treated, and is now being distributed back out into the community. The biggest buyer of the plant's recycled water is Calpine, an energy company that uses it to cool the towers at its power plants. The purple pipes also reach fields, parks, and golf courses. But what if this recycled water could be cleaned to the point where you could drink it? Well, actually, it can be, through a technology called reverse osmosis, or RO for short. Reverse osmosis uses a very fine filter to trap particles, but at the same time allows very small water molecules to pass through a membrane. The filters are made from a very thin, non-porous, synthetic membrane. Reverse osmosis filters are made from a very thin, non-porous synthetic membrane. Water is forced through the rolled-up membranes and collected at the center of the device. Left behind are viruses, bacteria, and even hormones that have seeped into our water supply. But being able to produce water that meets all health standards isn't enough. It took one California water district 13 years to complete its advanced water treatment plant, which opened in February of 2008. And a lot of that time was spent helping residents overcome the yuck factor.
Well, you know, when you first hear the concept about everything that we're going to flush out of our homes, we're going to clean it, and then you're going to be drinking it 3 years later, it's a little eerie, to tell you the truth, but it's cleaner, it's better, it makes us self-sufficient.
In Orange County, California, the clean water doesn't flow directly to the tap. Instead, it's pumped into percolation ponds, where it seeps into the groundwater. This groundwater recharge provides an extra layer of filtration and helps squeamish residents who might prefer to think their water comes from a natural source. In the San Francisco Bay Area, the city of San Jose will add reverse osmosis to its water pollution control plant by the fall of 2012. At first, the plant will only produce water for industries that need cleaner water than the plant now offers.
The Mayor and City Council of San Jose have adopted a very rigorous goal, which is to quadruple the use of recycled water in 15 years. As we look out into the future, we see the need not only to expand the purple pipes, but to really look at the possibility of recharging the recycled water into the groundwater. And it's a much less expensive way to dramatically increase the amount of recycled water that we're using.
Still, recycled water is expensive. The water district pays $50 to $200 per acre-foot to collect the rainwater that makes up half of its drinking water supply. And it pays an average of $400 per acre-foot to buy Delta water. But the recycled water it now pumps through the purple pipes costs $500 to $800 to produce. And this cost will only climb as the district produces even cleaner recycled water. Another option, desalination, can be even more expensive because of the energy needed to separate salt from water. Nevertheless, it's a method that's being tested as a future possibility around the globe. But one thing is clear. There will be no single solution to the world's growing water struggles. Balancing competing demands from farmers, a growing urban population, and fish and wildlife will only become more difficult in the years ahead. So will there be enough water for future generations? Will more dams be built or will conservation and new technology fill the demand? And who pays for it all? Turning on the tap never seemed so daunting. It turns out that preserving the Earth and its remarkable landscape may be the biggest challenge the world will face in the decades ahead.